Hi, driving instructors and rider trainers. This is Carly, Chief Executive of DIA and Diamond Advanced Motorists. I'm making a really amateur, really probably waffly, unscripted video right now just to get some information and communications to you in a much quicker way than we're perhaps able to in terms of writing copious bits of information. We are doing that bit of writing lots of information for our web pages and our other online channels to get stuff to you as soon as possible. And you'll have seen last night we sent you the communication about the test centres and tests being halted for the next 2 days. We'll continue to do all of that. Check back on our web pages, social media, and check your inbox for DIA mails coming to you directly over the next few days. We've put a dedicated page on driving.org all about coronavirus, and that'll be generally where we put all of our updates on anything to do with, guiding your business through these turbulent times, what to do about teaching, general advice about coronavirus, your welfare and safety as well. That can be found at driving.org/coronavirus-advice. First thing I wanted to tackle just briefly was the test centre closures. It has only been said that at the moment they're closing for 2 days. This is to allow the regulator to sit there and work out what are they going to be able to do about test provision throughout what could be months of disruption and problems with people being able to actually get to the test centres to perform their work as examiners and test centre managers. They, as the standards agency, has to consider the welfare and safety and health of ADIs, their pupils and their examiners. So they did not take this decision lightly to close down test centres. Obviously, with this move, there's going to be lots of rumour, there's going to be lots of conjecture. I would say anything to do with coronavirus at the moment, check your official sources. DIA and the other National Association of Strategic Partnerships, which are NJC and MSA, are first tier stakeholders of DVSA. So we get the confirmed and official information from decision makers first to spread through the industry. So if you're hearing rumours and you're not sure about them, please let one of us know, and so we can take that up with DVSA themselves. I know sometimes these announcements create more questions than we've perhaps got answers for at the time, but we're doing our best to get answers to you and get guidance to you as soon as we can. So that's talking about test centre closures. There is an exception in terms of the test centres closure. Frontline staff, people like paramedics that we need to try and get through driving tests as soon as possible, delivery drivers, things like that, those vocational tests will still be ongoing for the foreseeable future as well. One of the other big concerns that obviously you'll have at the moment is, regardless of whether you can actually take your pupils to test or not and how long those services might be halted, you're wondering about whether you should be teaching your pupils at all. There has been no guidance, official guidance to date from government or from the DVSA that you cannot teach. So it is at your discretion whether you still continue to offer lessons, and you have to think about protecting your own health and safety as much as that of your pupils. Again, on that website page that we've put together on coronavirus, there is some general advice just about keeping your car hygienic and clean, what you can do to protect yourself and your pupils. The thing we suggest if you are going to continue to teach is, and obviously it's a necessity as a self-employed person, to try and keep up your business if you can, but taking precautions like calling your pupils before every lesson or texting them and ascertaining their state of health or whether they've been in any way risking exposure to coronavirus is really, really important. And I think they'll appreciate it as much as you do in terms of protecting them and you. So we would suggest that you do that with every lesson, as things can change all of the time. You need to be asking pupils whether they've travelled to an infected area recently or feel they've been in an exposed area for any reason. You need to consider your very vulnerable pupils. So any pupils who are in the kind of 70 plus age bracket, if you have any pupils who have underlying health issues, I know it's a tricky one, but don't be afraid to ask these questions if they're in line with protecting their general health at the moment. And if they don't want to answer, they won't answer, but at least you've tried to find out that information. There is caution around pregnant ladies. The risk level to people who are carrying a child at the moment is not rated perhaps as highly as those who have underlying health conditions, but there are precautionary advisory guidelines in place that pregnant women should limit their exposure to coronavirus at the moment as well. So that's just a little bit about deciding to teach or not to teach at this moment in time. Clearly, it's very difficult for you guys because the social distancing measures that a lot of employers are taking in the workplace, you just can't take. You cannot be 2 meters away from your pupils. So you need to explain some of those things to your pupils as well about, you are continuing to work, why you have to, and the fact that you can't necessarily follow some of the guidelines that other people do so as well. In terms of some of the other measures that the government suggested people take, clearly we recognise that you also can't work from home. That's very difficult for you as ADIs. With that in mind, I did contact the business secretary and other individuals within the Department of Business, Energy and Industry yesterday to point out that in the ADI industry and the rider training industry, we have this unique situation in some ways in that people are self-employed, which I know is not unique. There's a lot of people self-employed and worried about that at the moment. But the very fact that you can't work from home and you can't keep social distancing measures in place and follow those guidelines, and also, it doesn't appear that very much of the funding that's been announced in this £350 billion of the packaging is actually accessible to the type of sole trader, traditional driving school that we have in the sector. I've just asked the question of government, what can we do to support this type of business through this crisis? Because we need to look at different things for businesses like driver and rider training schools as well. You're obviously going to be very concerned about income. You're going to be concerned about your, financial hardship if you cannot go out and deliver lessons, or it's getting very difficult to deliver lessons if pupils are cancelling, tests aren't available, all those kind of things. And I'm trying to think through what we can do to help. One of the things I've done this morning is to contact a whole host of organisations that are currently recruiting drivers. Now, I know this sounds strange, but I'm just trying to think through whether that creates some short-term employment opportunities for driver trainers if they cannot go out and deliver driving lessons for some reason. So we've been contacting the supermarkets and the big chains that are still going to continue to need people to help them with their logistics in the meantime. I know this isn't something that some people want to do. You not want to think about going out and doing any other job at the moment, but those who do want to consider some short-term employment with another organisation, it might be a good idea. And what I've pointed out to these organisations is there's no more safe and competent a driver than an approved driving instructor. You're already DBS checked if they need people who are going to be doing home deliveries and things like that. So what we've offered to do is advertise any positions of anybody who's looking for somebody with that driving competence and a trusted individual for free on all of our digital channels as well. And that means that we can then post these opportunities as soon as they come our way to our membership. So keep an eye on that. We'll try and develop an area of the website as we get more and more of these vacancies online to be able to give you those opportunities. And it's worth just looking at if there is short-term work that you can take on board if you find yourself without any driver training work and you need to keep those pounds and pennies flowing in. In terms of any benefits or any grants or anything that you can tap into at the moment, I referred to earlier the £350 billion worth of packages that the Chancellor announced the other day. We've been through that raft of measures and tried to analyse where that works for most driving instructors. Sadly, a lot of the business grants that are available you won't necessarily be eligible for, but there might be some funding coming through people like local authorities and things like that you could apply for. So what I would suggest you do in the short term until we can gather all this advice and put it on our website, this kind of advice already exists on websites such as the Federation of Small Businesses and also the Citizen Advice Bureau. Citizen Advice Bureau has got an amazing cache of resources and they've already worked very hard to get those up to date in terms of what the government's doing around financial and hardship measures. A thing I would suggest you do right now is contact HMRC because they have a service, Time to Pay, where they give assistance with you staggering your tax bills or your tax liabilities. So outgoings like that are obviously quite significant for a self-employed business. Talk to HMRC as soon as you can about any assistance they can give with you. There's a special HMRC helpline for that. And about coronavirus matters. Again, as we're writing our advice to go on the web pages, we'll put all these links in to where we think there is actually useful advice as well. Excuse me, consulting my pieces of paper here. There is also on the Citizen Advice Bureau some advice about if you have to tap into benefits, which is not inconceivable for some people at this moment in time who have no buffer to be able to help them with their bills and just to survive. you can already apply to your bank or lender for some level of mortgage relief, and the government is working with lenders to make sure that occurs and to give you some kind of payment holiday on that. So contact those kind of people. That's common sense. If you are a tenant in rented accommodation, clearly the government has announced that obviously landlords do not have the power to evict you for a 3-month period, and they'll be working on more measures to protect tenants in these tough times. You can also look to contact people like CAB and ask about your individual situation around universal credit and whether you can be eligible to apply for that. I understand that actually you can as a self-employed person if that gets too harsh. You may also be eligible for some employment, at the employment support allowance, the ESA. So that's something you might want to look into, and there are links on the CAB website that take you to kind of like an eligibility checklist to see whether you can apply for those as well. Some other important things to consider at the moment are your insurances. I have checked with the main insurers for training car insurance and also obviously our cover for professional indemnity and public liability. And whilst there's no intention or communicated intention to stop driving instructors strictly and regulatorily from actually delivering driving lessons and having an ADI license, anything like that. The insurers are saying that whilst you are still allowed to teach and the regulator is allowing you to do that, your insurances will still be valid. And you have the cover, but check with your training car insurer individually because everybody's got different things. I was checking with our white labelled insurance provision to see what their cover would be. There is something that members have also flagged as a concern. If the test centres are going to be closing for any period, will that mean also MOT centres are closing? And I've got an MOT coming up, and if I don't have it, my training car insurance is invalid. As we understand it, the MOT service is continuing to operate as normal as they can be. Obviously, they have exposure of their personnel to self-isolating or having coronavirus, so that might limit some services. But I would suggest, obviously, if you have an MOT coming up, that you try and book that in as soon as possible and get that done as soon as possible, because we just don't know what will happen with a lot of public services and private services over the next few months and how they're going to be able to have capacity and people on the ground to deliver those services as well. So just check every area of your business in terms of an exposure, anything that you due to renew, any third party you are reliant on to do something for you and keep you current with insurance or whatever. Make sure that you manage those exposures, not just for your own risk, but for the risk those services might not be continuing in the same vein as well. So I think I've covered everything that I can cover right now in terms of little bits and pieces of useful advice. As I said, this will all go on the website, so you've got the links you can click through. We'll continue to communicate as much as possible. We're trying to keep our offices open for as long as we can at the moment. Clearly, we also have to consider the risk to our own personnel, but everybody is on board for being here and doing as much for our members as we possibly can. The help desk is still operating. To manage the demand of calls and give you enough time to speak to us as we wish to, what we're asking people to do is first of all email us at help@driving.org, and then we can come back to you and give you a time that suits you and that our advisor can spend the most of time on the phone with you giving you advice. So please use that service, and obviously we're having quite a lot of people calling us right now. We do understand this is feeling like a really isolated time at the moment, a really worrisome time in a profession where you'll often feel like you're on your own with what you do. We want to try and support you as much as possible. We will continue to try and do that for as long as possible. And I can't see, given that we can actually offer a lot of what we do, even if we have to close the offices down, we can do it remotely. I can't see us not being able to offer advice at least. Keep your queries and questions coming into us. Every query you have, if we can't answer it, we will go and find a source of advice somewhere else. And it helps us to know what are your biggest concerns and so we can help address them in terms of the information we give as well. If you've got any ideas as well, if you've got any other things you think that we should be doing as a representative organisation, any links we should be making, please let me have those as well. You can reach me directly at Brookfield@driving.org, and I'm very happy to have a chat with you as well about that. In the meantime, sorry it's been so waffly and garbly, but we just want to get something quick to reassure you and offer you some advice as well. stay safe, stay well, and we hope that we'll be able to communicate with you frequently, and as we go, offer you, increasing good news that, things are getting a little bit better out there.